السلام عليكم.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء. واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد إن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن هدي محمد وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, today I'm going to be talking about a topic that a few weeks ago we would not have imagined something becoming more important and a topic eclipsing COVID-19 and the coronavirus and the entire world practically being shut down in many ways. Inshallah, today we're going to tackle the problem and the challenges associated with inequity in the country that we live in. We're going to talk about Black Lives Matter. We're going to start by understanding what the Islamic point of view is on racism. We'll then talk a little bit about what the history is of racism in this country and historically how Black people have fared, what the current situation is, I'll share a little bit about my story coming to this country and how my experience has been. And then we'll talk about some, inshallah, specific things that we can do as we live in this country and the support that we can provide to this movement whose time it feels like has finally come. So, from an Islamic point of view, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in ayah number 13 in Surah Hujurat, which I started the khutbah with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. And so Allah is telling us, He's acknowledging that we may look different, but He's also saying it doesn't matter. What really matters is the amount of taqwa we have, the amount of consciousness that we have. It matters the amount of faith that we have in the relationship we have with Allah. That is what Allah judges us by, not the way that we look. Racism, it turns out, was rampant even during the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Mecca, there was a person, a very senior person from the Quraysh. His name was Walid ibn Mughira. He was the father of Khalid ibn Walid. And Walid ibn Mughira was on the fence as to whether or not he should convert and embrace Islam. And so he decided that he was willing to convert to Islam. And he came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and he said, I will convert to Islam, but on one condition. My condition is that anytime I enter a gathering, I enter a room, a space where there are people of dark skin, those people need to leave that gathering. And so he was racist. He did not like people of dark skin. And at the time, Bilal ibn Rabah, who was one of the famous Sahabi, Ammar, there was a few others that were the famous Sahabi at the time. And so at the time, some of the Sahabi came to the Prophet ﷺ. Some of his closest allies, including his uncle Abu Talib, came to him and said, O Prophet of Allah, this is a small price to pay. It's a worthy compromise. Why don't you just say yes to Walid ibn Mughira, and then later on we can figure things out, because this feels like a fair compromise. The Prophet ﷺ had this opportunity to allow someone to come into the fold of Islam that was very, very important and very strong and very influential among the Quraysh. And in many ways, that would have been the easy thing to do. The Prophet, as you can imagine, outrightly refused. Because there are some common principles that cannot be compromised. And in the eyes of the Prophet ﷺ, race was one of them. At the Fath of Mecca, when the Muslims returned to Mecca and they overpowered the pagans, it was the time of Asr, and the Prophet ﷺ could have had anyone deliver the adhan. And we all know who delivered the adhan at that time. It was Bilal ibn Rabah. He was dark-skinned. He was a black person. And that is a great example of how the Prophet ﷺ, the example that he shared with us, was not one of saying, I'm not going to be racist. If he had asked Umar or Uthman or any of the other Sahabi to give the adhan, would there have been anything wrong with that? No. It would have been okay for anyone to have given the adhan. Would it have been, anyone have said the Prophet ﷺ was racist because he had Umar or Uthman or someone else give the adhan? No, it would not be racist to have someone other than Bilal give the adhan. The Prophet's example was one of, he was actively an anti-racist. And so he had Bilal give the adhan, not because he didn't want to appear racist, but because he wanted to actively give us the example of what it means to be a Muslim and to follow the example of the Prophet, which is to actively be anti-racist. And of course, we know in the last khutbah that the Prophet ﷺ gave, the khutbah al-wada', there's a section where the Prophet ﷺ says, all mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab. A non-Arab has no superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over a black, nor a black has any superiority over a white, except by piety and good action. And some historians say that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ may in fact have been the first anti-racist this world has seen. And my dear brothers and sisters, these were ideas, these were notions, these were words that are 1,400 years old. These aren't new. It's just these are words that we have not been paying attention to. And by we, I do mean those of us right here in this room and those of us that may be listening online. This isn't about the people that lived in this country hundreds of years ago and decided to hold slaves and decided to produce the system in which Black people was treated unfairly, but it's also about us. There are things that we say, there are things that we do, there are things that we think that are also racist. And we need to be thinking about those, and we need to be acknowledging those. And this isn't a time where we just point the finger at others, but we know in Islam, the accountability always starts with ourselves. And so we have to be taking stock for ourselves. When I first came to the US, it was because my father had said to me, you can go anywhere you want in the world. And he said, if you are going to be committed to education and to learning and making something out of yourself, wherever you want to go, you can go. I chose to come to the US of all the places in the world because I had heard that the US was a land of opportunity. And what better place to go than the land of opportunity to, inshallah, be successful. I've been very fortunate. I've had good education. I've had many degrees, many certifications, job experiences, promotions, all of those things. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I have been extremely blessed. And I've always thought that I've been blessed and I've been fortunate, yes, because Allah helped me, but because I worked really hard. And I gave up sleep, and I gave up time with friends, and I had the discipline, and I did all of those things to attain them. However, my dear brothers and sisters, as I've learned the history about the Black people, my thinking has changed a little bit. And as I've learned the history of the Black people, where I used to think, you know what, I came from a foreign country, I didn't know anything about this place, and if I can be successful, why can't someone who grew up and was born here, why can't they be successful? Why can't they get an education? Why can't they get a job? Why can't they get married, raise a family, have a home, do all of those things that I've done, and I feel like I'm, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, reasonably successful. It turns out racism in this country is not just something that happens conversationally. It's not just something that happens ad hoc. It's not just something the way the server looks at you at the restaurant. It's not just something the way the teacher looks at you in that classroom. It's not just how your friends of a different race treat you because you happen to be dark-skinned. It turns out that racism in this country is about 400 years old, from the first time that the slaves came. And many Muslims don't know, I didn't realize this until a few years ago, that about 30% of all the slaves that came to the US were Muslims. Some of the most literate people among the slaves that wrote the books that detailed their experiences, those individuals were Muslim. And so, my dear brothers and sisters, our experiences have to be much more tied to the slaves, to the African Americans, than perhaps we are currently thinking they are. When President Roosevelt signed Social Security into law in 1935, which was to help those people that needed that safety net, it was estimated that 65% of African Americans and 70 to 80% of all African Americans that were living in the South were ineligible. So this is a safety net. This is to help people that need it. But if you were African American, there was a 65% chance that you would be ineligible. That was systematic. In 1950, as late as 1950, the National Association of Real Estate Boards, their code of ethics, had this statement in their code. A realtor should never be instrumental in introducing a neighborhood, any race or nationality, or any individuals whose presence would be clearly detrimental to property values. It went on to say, a colored man of means who has given his children a college education and thought they were entitled to living among whites, those people should not be invited into neighborhoods. So the realtors were told, don't sell homes, don't invite people into the neighborhoods. And over again, there are many cases where this is the case. If we look at the number of people that get held up because of drug charges, the discrimination in education systems, we know the mortality rate for Black women is about 2.5 times greater than it is for white women when they're giving childbirth. Over and over again, we see that there is a very, very big disparity. Black boys are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white boys from school. If a Black girl is 6 times more likely to be suspended than a white girl in the same school. Black people are twice as likely to be hospitalized for COVID-19 than a white person. Black people are more likely to get stopped at a traffic stop by a cop during the day than they are at night. Stanford looked at 95 million traffic stops conducted by police in the US. What reason is there? If I'm going to behave badly, I'm probably going to do it during the day and during the night. The difference is at night, you can't tell my skin color. So at night, Black people are proportionally not stopped as often as they are during the day. This one statistic, I read this and this really stuck with me. This statistic says that the sons of Black families from the top 1%, the richest in the entire country, the top 1%, those sons are just likely to be incarcerated, to be sent to prison on any given day as the sons of white families earning $35,000. My dear brothers and sisters, if this is not systematic, I don't know what would be. This is real. The Black people in our country have not had it fair for them. It's not that they could just work hard and do this. At every step, they're being pulled down. When it comes to getting a mortgage, it's harder for them. They get rejected. They have not the same laws are being applied to them. They're not being applied to them fairly. When they have to issue a sentence for a drug violation or others, much more often, 5 times more often, the maximum sentence is given to a Black person versus it is to a white person. And so when we look around and we see the state of Black people less educated, less successful, it's not because of their lack of trying. It's not because of something they've done. It's because something the system has done. And that's where I have to then recognize for me, if I've been successful, yes, Allah has been responsible for it. Yes, I couldn't have done it without Allah. Yes, I couldn't have done it without my hard work. But you know what? I couldn't have done it without a set of systems that allowed me to be successful. And so I have to have the humility to recognize exactly that. A colleague of mine, Lonnie Haynes, who happens to be our Chief Diversity Officer at Highmark Health, he shared a story with me this week. He said, when I go for a walk in my neighborhood, he's a vice president in a $20 billion organization, so he's done fairly well for himself. When I go out for a walk in my own neighborhood, I take with me my Highmark badge cover. Inside it, I have my Highmark badge, I have my driver's license, I have a credit card, and I have my business card with my title on it and my wife's name, Stephanie Haynes, written on the back with her phone number. And he says, I do that because I don't know as a Black person who someone is going to mistake me for in my own neighborhood. And I don't know every time I go into my own neighborhood if I'm going to come home safely or not. My dear brothers and sisters, this isn't just anyone. This person has been all over the world. He's worked for some of the world's largest companies. This person has 2 master's degrees, a PhD, yet in his own neighborhood, he's not safe. What kind of an existence is that? So when we think about this being the land of opportunity and me feeling like, yes, this was the land of opportunity and it delivered for me, it delivered for me not because I was awesome, but it delivered for me because I was lucky. And my guess is many of you have had the same experience I've had. If you're in senior positions, you're physicians, you're teachers, you're in technology, whatever you're doing, you have to recognize that it wasn't just because of your hard work, it's because we were in a system that has allowed us to be successful. Yes, there's Islamophobia, yes, being Muslim but I promise you, being black in this country is so much worse than being a Muslim in this country. Now just imagine what it would feel like to be a black and Muslim in this country. Those are the people that really have it hard and have it hard on every turn. We've got to get beyond ourselves, have the humility, have the empathy to recognize the challenges and the difficulty. And I can tell you for myself, one of the things I was thinking is, when this dies down, you know, it's not easy to see this in the news and see people talking about it at work and at home and social media. It's all negative. And so you feel like that when this dies down, you know, but just the fact that I thought that, you know what that confirms? That means I'm among the privileged class. That means I am absolutely among the lucky in this country that have had the opportunity. Do you think any black person would ever think those words that I thought when this dies down? They're thinking, finally, after 400 years, maybe someone is actually listening, paying attention to what's happening, and maybe this will not be, as a friend of mine just said to me today, maybe this won't be a moment, maybe this will be the movement that we've needed so badly. And so, how do we make this land, this country that is our country? We live here, many of us were born here, raised here, we're raising our kids here, we work here, we studied here. This is our country. If you still think someplace, other place is back home, well then home is where you live, where you raise your family, where your livelihood. My dear brothers and sisters, we have to start thinking of this as our home if we live here. And if we're going to be here, we see our futures here, we have to work on how we make this a better place, because that is an obligation we have. There's obligation we have on our neighbors. We know that from an Islamic perspective. And so how do we make sure we are fulfilling that right? The Prophet ﷺ told us that the root cause of racism is arrogance. Is arrogance to believe because my skin looks a certain way, I am better than someone else. My dear brothers and sisters, let's make sure we're not among the arrogant. Let's make sure we're not thinking of someone because of the color of their skin. We're thinking of someone based on their intentions, based on their actions, based on what they're doing. We assume positive intent, and we leave Allah to really judge people. But we should look at people for what they do and what their intentions are, for the decisions they actually are able to make, not for the decisions that were made for them or for the lack of fairness that they simply had to accept. And my dear brothers and sisters, we all know that our deen encourages us, it implores us to always, always, always take the side of the oppressed against the oppressor. And that is what I encourage myself and I encourage all of us to do, is make sure that we are not just passively sitting there and saying, I'm not racist. I've never done this. I've never done that. I've always been fair in hiring. No, that's not enough. Just saying I'm not racist, you're not even meeting the bare minimum. I'm not meeting the bare minimum when I say I'm not racist. What am I doing to actively be anti-racist? That is the question we have to be asking ourselves. Otherwise, we are absolutely falling short. And we have to be doing things to actively come to the aid of those that are oppressed. And in this case, it is our African American brothers and sisters. And if we're thinking, well, what about the Muslims? And what about the brown people? And what about? My dear brothers and sisters, here's the thing. African Americans are oppressed systematically more than anybody else in this country. If we fix this for them, do you think we'll fix it for everyone? Probably. So why not solve it for the hardest hit and help the people that are most oppressed, and realize that yes, at the end of the day, we do have tough times. And I can tell you, for me, the times where I felt racism is at TSA. Alhamdulillah, COVID has solved that because I haven't had to go to the airport for 4 months. Right? So we're good. Life is good for us. How do we start to take care of others in our community as well? One thing's important. I feel like I need to say this just to put this out there. At no time, do we ever condone violence? Do we ever condone someone hurting another individual, someone hurting another's property? That is absolutely not something we support. We support the ideals of equality, the ideals that really make America. We absolutely support those. And we should continue to do that. The other thing, again, I'm sharing this just based on my own experience because that's the one area that I am absolutely an expert on, is my own experience and my journey. I know for me, this was a topic that was very uncomfortable. I didn't want to talk about it with anyone at work. I didn't want to talk about it with my peers, with my team, because I wasn't sure what the right thing to do is, or right thing to say is. Maybe I'll hurt someone's feelings. Maybe I'll say something insensitive. Maybe I'll get it wrong. Maybe I should be smarter. Maybe I should know the answer. And as I think about it, that for me was just a really, really fantastic excuse. And I just didn't want to be uncomfortable. I'd rather go through life thinking about the things that make me comfortable, avoid the conversations that are difficult, avoid the conversations that are uncomfortable. My dear brothers and sisters, I encourage myself first and foremost, and I encourage all of you to get uncomfortable, to have those difficult conversations. And you can start those conversations with, I may not get it right, I may get it wrong, I may make mistakes. We're better off making those mistakes and having those conversations incorrectly than not having those conversations and avoiding them altogether. I've now mustered the courage, alhamdulillah, to have that conversation with my direct reports, with my entire team. I was asked to speak on this topic in front of the entire enterprise. And initially I said, this is scary, I don't know what I'm gonna do, maybe I won't get it right. And then I said, well, if it's time to be uncomfortable, this feels like a really, really good way of becoming uncomfortable and showing that these conversations are one that we can have. And I'll leave you with this quote to end this part of the khutbah. Martin Luther King said, there comes a time when silence is betrayal. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. My dear brothers and sisters, are we going to choose to be silent? Our community, Muslims, we've largely been silent on this topic. I can't think of a situation where I've ever had this discussion myself or been engaged in a discussion with someone else on this topic in the Muslim community before. Maybe that should change. Maybe we should be having these discussions in our homes, in our workplaces, with our friends, with our neighbors, if they're black, if they're not black, and recognize that when we do it, we'll be uncomfortable. But at least in that discomfort, hopefully, that will edge us towards being anti-racist. Hopefully in that discomfort, that will edge us towards not being among the silent, because the silent are the ones that are following the path of betrayal. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Ya Allah, thank you for all your blessings, favors, and bounties you have bestowed upon each of us and on our community. Ya Allah, give us the courage to have uncomfortable conversations. Ya Allah, guide us to always take the side of the oppressed. Ya Allah, make us among those that are actively anti-racist. Ya Allah, aid us in making this land a land where no one is among the unlucky. Ya Allah, aid us in making this land a land of opportunity for everyone. Ya Allah, Ya Rashid, guide us to make the right du'as. Ya Allah, Ya Mujib, respond to our du'as. Ya Allah, Ya Hayy, accept our du'as. our intentions and our deeds. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم واتقوه يجعل لكم مخرجا وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
My dear brothers and sisters, if I said anything that was offensive or incorrect, that was not my intention, and for that I ask for your forgiveness and forgiveness from Allah. And if there's anything of value, it surely came from Allah, the source of all that is good. Please don't stand shoulder to shoulder, and inshallah pray with as much khushu as you can muster. Yeah. Allahu Akbar. Allah. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والتين والزيتون وطور سينين وهذا البلد الأمين لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون. فما يكذبك بعد بالدين أليس الله بأحكم الحاكمين. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. لإيلاف قريش إيلافه رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum. Just three announcements. First one is that we are still short on votes, so if you're a member of MAN or your family, please go and vote. Review the proposed changes and vote to approve or disapprove the amendments. Please look for the email. The email I think was sent last night. The other thing is the form. We usually ask you to fill the form. You can do it online or you can do it outside. Few reasons. One is that we know how many people are coming. Second is if there is an exposure, God forbid, then we can let the rest of the people know that you guys were here on the stage and we had a positive case. And inshallah, we will be discussing and inshallah we'll try to allow the sisters to join us on Friday prayers on next time, inshallah. Thank you.